Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I have the third preview case from FMWC DACH, this one called So Many Holidays. Now, while the other two preview cases that we've seen so far are available for free to the public on their website, this one will be sent to you for free if you sign up for the competition. So you go on their website, you sign up, then once your registration has been received, they will email you a copy of this case. If you don't have it yet, check out the link in the description. You will see a link to the FMWC DACH website. Let me go ahead and read the introduction of this case for you here. I'm only going to read this introduction part. If you want to read the whole details, feel free to pause the video here and take some time to read it. The case So Many Holidays is about the holidays, weekends, and the days in between. The goal is to find out which days are public holidays in which regions, how many bridging days are necessary, and when conferences with participants from different regions are possible. So if we take a look at the data that we have, so we have this tab with what I believe are the names of the holidays, their dates in 2025, and codes for the regions or countries where this holiday is celebrated. And then on this region in tab, we have a very long German word, which I don't know, but it looks like a code for the region, the name of the region. I know these are country names, so perhaps country name and then a country code for each of those. So yeah, this looks exciting. If you get this case, keep in mind it is more difficult than the other cases that we have seen so far. So it's a great opportunity to see where your Excel competition levels or skills are. You can set yourself a 30-minute timer and see how far you get with it. I am going to go ahead and try to run through. I'm going to see if I can get a complete solve within that 30 minutes. So let's give this a try, and here we go. Level 1 is asking us to return the holiday name based on the date that the holiday is on. If there is no holiday on that date, we respond with keiner. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert my data into tables so that it's easier for me to reference. One of the downsides you're going to see is it will slow down my data a little bit, but we can give this a try. So the dates in that table are only the dates where there is an actual holiday. So I can do an XLOOKUP to find the holiday name based on that date, but then also for times where there is no holiday on that date, that means there's no holiday on the table, I can just use the word keiner if it's not found. Level 2, we are given a holiday in a region and we are asked if that holiday is actually a holiday within a region. But we don't need to consider the regions alone, we also need to consider the country that the regions are in. Now, if you remember in the holiday table, there are regions listed by code. And so what I'm going to do is first I'm going to take all of these regions, turn that into a table, once again, make it easier for referencing. And then I'm going to look for these regions within that holiday table. So I'm going to start a XLOOKUP function to bring out the code for both the region of Saarland and the code for the country that the region is in, which is fortunately also in the region table. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want to look up the holiday in the table and bring out the regions. Now I see there's an O, there's a D, and there's a CH. But before I check that, I need to do some fixing with the regions. So if you take a look, Valentinstag is in BGLD, but there are also GL regions, there are also D regions. And so what I need to do is I'm going to create this new regions column which separates all the regions with a comma both before and after. So that way when I want to look for a region within that table, I am going to look for that region, but I'm also going to look for the two commas around it. What this does is this prevents a chance of looking for a region code which is part of another region code which doesn't actually refer to that region. So to do this, I'm going to create an OR function, which is saying if this region code is in that list of regions or the country code is in that list of regions, return true. And after I return true, the question is asking us to give an answer of ja or nein. So if I get true or false, I'm just going to simply change true to ja and false to nein. Now what's happening here is that I'm getting an error for the sysnumber search function. It's taking me a little while to identify why that is, but it's because of a misplaced closed parentheses. So I moved this case 71 within the parentheses. Now this OR statement, this isNumber search statement, is working properly, and now I can convert it to yeah and 9 correspondingly. On to level 3, we are basically asked how many holidays are in this region. So we are given a region such as Burgenland, which has 3 holidays for the region itself, but we also need to consider the regions in the country that Burgenland is in. So in this case, Austria, which has 21 other holidays. So I'm going to bring out my region and country codes again, just like I previously did, and I'm going to look for the holidays both within that region and within that country. All I need to do after that is simply add them together, and that should tell me how many holidays we have in that region. Now here I'm going to use a COUNTIFs statement, and you will notice a lot in my solve that I go back and forth between COUNTIFs and filter. These can both be used to accomplish what I want to, but they both have to be done in a different way. So for example, COUNTIFs, we can include wildcards within the statement, but when I do filters, you're going to see a lot more of this isNumber search combination. So I might struggle with getting those back and forth. Level 4. We're asked to do the same thing about finding all the holidays within the region, but we are looking for how many holidays there are in a certain month. So now we're given a region and a month. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my data a little bit. I'm going to include the month number in its own column. So that way it's going to be easier to reference when I do a filter or COUNTIF statement later. So you see with this month function, it just returns the number for the month. That's pretty easy and straightforward. And now I can take this same calculation that I just did for level 3, and all I need to do is I need to include an additional criteria and criteria range. That criteria being the month that is listed. So now I have one region holiday and one country holiday for Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. And then that's going to give me the answer of 2, which is going to help me solve the rest of this level. Now in level 5, we're introduced to the concept of bridge days. So in the US, you think about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is on a Thursday. Friday is usually also part of the holiday. In this case, Friday would be considered a bridge day, taking the weekend and connecting it with the holiday itself. And so what we are asked to do is look to find out how many bridge days there are in each region. Now, a tricky part of this level is that a bridge day, which is also a holiday, is no longer considered a bridge day. It's just considered a normal holiday. So we're not going to consider that as a bridge day in this level. So to do this, I'm going to add 2 columns to this table. The first column is going to determine what is the weekday of the holiday. I can use a text and a DDD as my text format. The DDD, 3 Ds, brings out the weekday name. So I can very easily tell which day of the week the holiday is on. And then when I do, if it's on a Tuesday, I'm going to subtract 1 from that date. That's going to be the bridge day. Same thing if it's Thursday, I'm going to add 1 to that date. That's going to be the bridge day. And if it is neither, I'm going to try to leave that cell blank. There is no bridge date for that holiday. So now that I have the bridge dates out, I'm going to go back and I am going to create a bit of a complicated statement. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list of first all of the holidays within that region and country. And then I'm going to create a second list of all of the bridge days. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want all the bridge days, but if that bridge day is also a holiday, I don't want to count it. So there you see I brought out all of my holidays. Now keep in mind that these are in Excel's format, which is the number of days after 1900. That's okay. I could turn them into date format so it's easier for me to read, but for me right now the format is not as necessary, more so the number of days. Now for this bridge days, I'm also going to filter out all of the blank cells, so that gets me a nice list of 4 days. Now when I tried to do this before, I tried to use a simple equal statement, but what I really need to do here is a by row statement, which allows me to run the same formula throughout every row of that bridge days lemma. And that formula that I did was count if that bridge day exists in the list of holidays. If so, then return true, because it's the false ones that we need. False meaning that bridge day is not otherwise a holiday, so it does count as a bridge day. Now we can go on to level 6, and at level 6 we're going to start planning a conference, and the attendees for these conferences are going to come from 2 possible regions. So in the example, they could either come from Karnten or Solentherm, and I apologize for mispronouncing those. But basically the key consideration is 1, we don't want the conference to run onto a weekend, and 2, we don't want the conference to run into a holiday from either of those regions or the country that those regions are into. So quite a lot to consider. What I'm going to do for this level is I'm going to create a list of all the dates in 2025. So what you see here is I'm doing 2025 January, and then for the day number, I'm going to do a sequence of 365. Just like what I showed with my time formula in my solve of the function bar and grill, that overriding is going to let me just run through all the dates in that calendar. So that works well. Now that I brought out my weekdays, I'm going to see if either of them are the weekend. I can't use an OR statement on the array because that OR statement is basically going to return for all of the days. I just really need to see for 1 day each. So there we go. We get a 1 if it's a weekend or a 0 if it's not. I'm thinking about turning it into true and falses here, but for now I'm just going to leave them as 1s and 0s to work with. Now let's bring out the holidays for the regions. Now to do that, I'm going to do the same thing as I've done previously, which is to bring out the region code and the country code for each of the region. Then after I do that, I can use those codes to search the holiday table itself. Now to get the holidays and bridge days, I'm going to have a little bit of a very complicated formula. What I'm thinking in my mind is I want to stack all the holiday dates and all of the bridge dates together within one column. For 2 reasons. 1, I can see if any of those dates exist on my 2025 date list. And 2, then I can easily copy this formula from region 1 over to region 2. And it doesn't require a lot of changes. Now this formula is probably going to look very complicated because there's 4 things I need to look for. I need to look for the holidays in that region, the holidays in that country, the bridge days in that region, and the bridge days in that country. So we're going to get a pretty long VStack formula, which is basically me stacking all of those dates together. Now, what's really throwing me off is once I start adding in the bridge days, I am getting a calc error for this function. And it's taking me a little time to figure out why that is. In the end, I figured out it's because there are no bridge days for this Carnton region. And so I'm getting what they call a blank array, and that's really messing up with this calculation. So what I need to do is in my filter functions, I need to add an if empty argument, basically telling the formula, what should you do if there is no result from this function? And I'm going to apply it to all of my filter functions, so that way I won't have to worry about this in a later level. Now here I have a blank cell, and I'm thinking that I probably should get rid of the blank cell, and I'm also probably thinking that I should sort these in order. In reality, the way that I'm going to approach this level, neither of these really apply, so I don't have to worry so much about it. I'm going to do a 2 call and 3, and that 3 is basically saying filter out any blank cells. It's not filtering out the blank cells. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my table on the left here, and I'm going to see if this date is a holiday for either of these two regions. So I'm going to count the VSTACs, and I'm going to count them for those dates. Now, when I do this at first, the formula is not going to calculate correctly for me. Remember, countif function, you cannot include a calculated array in them. So instead I'm going to turn this into a sum of a comparison formula here. Now, this is also not going to work exactly well because the lengths of the two arrays are going to be different for the length of the date array, and that's not going to let me do my comparison. I probably should be doing this in a by row function, but what I end up doing instead is just doing this comparison for a single date and then copying that formula down for the rest of the dates on this sheet. I need to make sure that I'm doing my absolute references. And now, because I'm dealing with more than just zeros, I'm going to turn this into a comparison. So if it's ever greater than 0, then I want to turn it into a true statement. Otherwise, leave it as false. So now I have a list of weekend dates and holiday dates, and I want to see whether it is workable. So if they're both false, then that date is going to be workable for the conference. Now I'm going to do a work count column, which basically is going to let me keep track of how many days in a row are workable for the conference. So keep in mind the conference has a duration of 2 days, which means I need 2 days in a row which we can host a conference. So this scan function, what that's going to do is it's going to count the number of days in a row that is going to work. Now I'm going to include this after start, which is basically saying, is this start date after the proposed start date that was given in the question? So you see when I scroll down, the falses all start to turn to trues, which that then tells me that, yes, this is before the start date. Now I need to change my workable formula just a little bit. So this is going to be a little bit confusing because basically the first 2 columns need to be false. The last column needs to be true in order for the conference to work. Now, fortunately for me, this formula actually did work well. Now I need to find out when is the starting date for the conference. So I start first by doing an XLOOKUP. Basically, I wanted to look up a 2 and return the date. But then I remember that I'm not looking for a 2 and returning the date equal to that 2. I'm looking for a 2 and returning the date equal to the 1, or the starting date of that conference. Now, there are a couple ways to do this. I probably could have used the xlookup function, but instead I'm going to turn this into an index match, because with an index match, I can change the number or the row number that I'm trying to match based on the number of days we have in this conference. So you see here that for the duration, I look up at 2, I go up 1 row, and that will get me the equivalent date of day 1. This data table did not work. All of my answers are looking equal. That's because I haven't created that link to that case worksheet. So I'm going to go ahead and create the link here starting in F12. This xlookup function will build that link. I'll need to delete the other ones. Now when I refresh this data table, now I get workable dates and I can bring them over to this sheet. Now, level 7 is actually the same as level 6. The only difference is that instead of only working with 2 regions, now we are working with 4 regions. Fortunately, the way that I set up my model, I can work with that. So I'm going to bring this, copy and paste these instructions over again. And then what I'll need to do is when I build my link, I need to change it to G to J to now G to L. So it brings out the information for all 4 regions now. Now I just need to copy this formula for the name and code. This is an interesting behavior. When I use the drag handle, it actually changes the lookup ranges in the table. I wonder if I copy and paste if that does that too, but it's different behavior than I'm looking. So this means I have to manually copy and paste the text of the formula and then change the text of the formula to match what I'm actually looking for. And I'm gonna have to do the same thing with the holidays and bridge dates. I probably could have tried copy and paste and it could have worked, but just to be safe, I copied and pasted the very long formula. Fortunately, when I do that, I only have to change 4 things, and those are those 4 cell references in that formula. Doing so will bring out the correct dates, and I can do that once again for that 4th region. Now I'm just going to check if my count lays up to 5 because we're looking for 5 days in a row. I scroll down, I do see a 5. For some reason, my sheet is going way down to row 1,048,576, I think. I don't know why, but that's going to affect my scrolling a little bit. So I do want to change that. I tried deleting anything that was possible in those rows and then perhaps saving the worksheet. That should then stop allowing me to move down to those rows. I look again for a 5. I do see a 5. What's throwing me off is I'm seeing a range of number signs, which I should know that this does not necessarily mean an error. It just means my column isn't wide enough. So now I adjust that. I make sure that everything is linked up properly. I make sure that the dates match, they do. And then I'm going to copy and run my data table. Now, if you look very closely, you'll see that the countries for region 3 and 4 did not copy over. And I will say I got very lucky that this did not affect my answers. Very lucky. All right, let's go up and take a look at the bonuses. Bonus 1, which region, including holidays of this region and state, has the most holidays overall? Return the name of the region, not the code. So I'm going to add an extra column to this table to count up how many holidays within that region. This could be a very simple combination of 2 count ifs statements. So once again, because I'm using count ifs or count if, I can use wildcards in this statement. So far, I've only added the holidays for the region. So when I look up the maximum value and return the corresponding holiday name, it's not going to work out well for me at first. Instead, I need to add the holidays for the state in that column, which then should get me the correct answer. And we see here that it does. Bonus 2. How many statewide public holidays celebrated in Austria will fall on a weekend in 2025? So for this one, what I did was I created a filter. And I wanted to filter all of the holidays within Austria. I tried to create a fancy group by function to make this work, but that did not work for me. So I'm going to have to go back, and now on this left side, I'm just going to do count ifs. Count if this says sat, and count if it says sun, and then add them together. Here I have 5 days on the weekend, and that will match. Bonus 3, adding up all public holidays. How many public holidays fall on the day of the week on which most public holidays take place? Kind of a wordy way to do this, but this one I know the group by function will work, basically saying which weekday has the most holidays. I say Friday has 9 holidays. That's going to check out. Bonus 4, how many bridging days take place in Burgenland on a Friday? So this is what I want to do for this one is basically I want to count how many holidays themselves land on a Thursday, because keep in mind that when a bridging day is a Friday, that means the holiday itself is on a Thursday. Now, what I tried to do at first was I misread the question. I'm doing the wrong thing. I am looking for how many bridge days there are in total from that region. So first thing I do is I count the total number of bridge days for each region. But now I look back and I see that that's not the question that it's asking me. So that was a lot of work for nothing. But let's try to go again. Let's see if I can create the right formula to count up the number of Friday bridge days for this region. Now I include the country. I see that there are 5 holidays listed on a Thursday, but that answer is coming up wrong. Let's see if I can figure out why. For this bonus now, I've decided to take a look at this table manually. Now when I go into this custom filter for text filters, I can actually look up 2 possible filters. So I'm going to look up if the region name is contained, and then also if the country code is contained. Now when I do that, I do see that there are 5 holidays that are listed on a Thursday, but the case says this is wrong. So instead of trying to figure it out, I'm going to go ahead and go to the 5th bonus and perhaps come back and take a look at this fourth one later. Bonus 5, about all tasks in level 7, what's the greatest distance between the earliest possible start date and the date that they have requested? Now, fortunately, this one is easier. I'm going to take the maximum of the difference between these two dates. I see 15 days is the answer. Let's go back to bonus 4. Now, what I'm thinking here now is, do I want to consider that one of these dates might also be a holiday? I'm looking, and first thing that I see is that none of these dates are right next to each other. So it's not like the Bridge Day is a holiday in the same region. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my Bridge Day formula a little bit. And basically this updated Bridge Day formula is going to say if this Bridge Day is counted as a holiday anywhere else, then don't count it as a Bridge Day. Which means leave it blank. Now, I did copy and paste this formula for Bridge Day, even though I'm counting it as a variable within this function. I don't need to do that again. I wrote this so I could just replace that as Bridge Day. So now that leaves all these other Bridge Days as blank. I'm going to do this custom text filter again. And one thing that I do notice this time is that only 4 of the Bridge Days are actually counted as days. I'm going to change this answer to 4. That's going to check out. And I've solved this case right in the nick of time. 29 minutes and 59 seconds. Whew, this is a challenging one. It's a challenge for a lot of competitors when they've tried it, including myself. But it is a real fun case, and it brings about a real question when it comes to planning these events around regions or even countries with different holidays. Thank you, FMWC DACH, for bringing this case out. Like I said, if you guys want to give it a try, take a look at my description. You'll see a link to sign up for the FMWC DACH competition. After you sign up, you will receive access to this case. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you like this kind of content, please do subscribe. I put out a new solve video every week. Some of them about the Microsoft Excel World Championship, some about these regional competitions, such as FMWC DACH, and some of them about the Financial Modeling World Cup, where we use Excel to create financial models within a certain time limit. So do subscribe, do take a look at that from week to week, and I hope to see you next week for my next video.
It's the Excel